All right.
All right.
The hearing.
The hearing.
You're going to ask me specific
Good.
questions about the hearing. Okay.
I'm going to ask you specific questions about the hearing. That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, just to recap, we did an episode months ago, I think it was like episode 5, where we went over the hearing, and I just wanted to basically do a follow-up episode on that. Probably do it a little bit quicker, but I'll use the same structure. So before we talk about the hearing itself, what are some things that the client should keep in mind building the case up until that point? Because you and I both know that the hearing is the make or break moment. You have the best chance to win your case, highest approval rating at the hearing level, but you also have many opportunities to tank your own case. And so before we actually get to that point, what are some pieces of advice you have for clients?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And the number one piece of advice that I give folks when we're at the hearing level is let's make sure that all the information that we're sending to Social Security is up to date, not just correct, but up to date. The worst thing that you can do, well, one of the worst things that you can do in a hearing is go in there with your chest puffed out in, the spring of 2026, and we haven't updated your medical records since the spring of 2025. And the first thing that the judge is going to ask is, have you seen anybody in the last year? Yeah, Mr. Groves. Well, we asked them, and they said they hadn't seen anybody in the last year. Well, I didn't know if that's what you meant. Just, keep us up to date on things. At the hearing level, I don't know if we talked about this or not, which we probably should have. At the hearing level, as your representative, I am responsible for making sure that the record has all the medical records that need to be had for your disability hearing. So do I order them? Yes. Do I pay them? Good God Almighty, I pay a lot of money every year for medical records. Yes, I pay for them. And unlike some firms, I don't bill you for it. I just eat those costs. But it's my responsibility, and because it's my responsibility, you got to keep me informed. Mm-hmm. I saw, Dr. Smith 2 weeks ago. Okay, well, the hearing's in 2 weeks, so we probably have enough time to get those records in. And the great thing is when we get records in, they're usually in electronic format these days, and we have access to your file to where we can upload them instantaneously. It's literally a click on the button. We fill in some dates of treatment, and we fill in the date that we're submitting them, and we click a button, and boom, they are part of your record. So it's not difficult to do, but you got to let us know. And we've said this a lot, and I'm just not going to ever stop saying it, that you need to trust the process. We get to the hearing level, you definitely want to have the right attitude, and that is, what is the purpose of the hearing level? They got my medical records? Yeah, they're definitely going to have the ones that you've been denied on at the initial and reconsideration level. They have those medical records. And if you've kept me updated and I've been doing my job, you have the medical records that have been updated in the last several months. They have those. And it begs the question, well, why do I even need to go in there? They have my medical records. They have the rules, the Social Security law. Why do I have to go in there? Well, it is your only time that you get to in person, even though in person's these days usually by phone, but you're talking in a conversation. You're not filling out a form. The conversation can go however it needs to go to get the right information, and for the judge to say, yeah, this young lady, she's telling me the truth. I can tell by the way she's testifying that she's telling me the truth. It is your only opportunity to do that. And you just brought up the statistical, what I consider, the ringer. The main allowance at the Social Security level, initial reconsideration, hearing, appeals counsel, hearing, it's the hearing level.
Definitely.
That's where the vast, vast, vast majority, and we're not talking just numerically, we're talking percentage-wise. Do you think it's any coincidence that it's the only opportunity you have to have a conversation with the decision maker? I don't think it's any coincidence at all. I mean, it's the only time that you actually get to be questioned by the decision maker, the judge in this case. You get to answer however you want to answer because it's a conversation. You're not filling out a form. If the judge needs more information, then the judge asks you a follow-up question. That never happens on a form. You know, if I think that your answer was somewhat vague or I don't even like your answer, when it's my turn to question you, I can come in and I can cross-examine you and say, you told the judge that, if you push yourself, you could carry, up to 20 pounds. When's the last time you pushed yourself and carried up to 20 pounds? Oh, Mr. Groves, I haven't done that probably in 3 years. Why? It hurts so bad if I even try to pick up 5 pounds. Okay, thank you.
Right.
And that's the way that these hearings go. It's no accident, no coincidence that the vast majority of cases that are won with Social Security are won at the hearing level. So back up to what you need to expect. First of all, you need to trust the process, and we say that a lot. But you need to understand that there is a purpose for the hearing. It's your only opportunity to get to talk to a judge in a conversational way. And as such, take advantage of that opportunity. It pays off. Statistically, you can look at Social Security statistics. Statistically, your chance of winning your case never get better than when you're in front of a judge. So take advantage of that. Be prepared. Make sure that your treatment is in line, that you've told me everything I need to know, that I have made sure that to update your file. And then make sure when you get into a hearing that you don't ramble. You don't answer a question that hasn't been asked. Ms. Smith, I see that you have this problem with degenerative disc disease, so I'd like to talk a little bit about your back. I am so depressed, Your Honor, that, I can't even concentrate on watching TV. Okay, well, we'll get to that. I'm asking you about your back disorder right now. Well, you would not believe the problems that I have struggling with these headaches that I have, every week. Okay, if that continues to happen in a disability hearing, it's really problematic because eventually the judge is just going to stop paying attention. He's going to basically think you're being either just a rude person or you're deliberately being evasive. He's asking about the back, and for some reason you won't go there. You're talking about other things. So you're trusting the process, and you go in there, and you basically just answer the questions that are put to you. Mm-hmm. You want to answer things fully, but you don't want to ramble. And trusting the process means that if we need to talk about that problems with those problems with depression, those problems with your headaches, and the judge is asking about your back, please trust the process that if the medical record shows you got problems with depression and headaches, 90% of the time the judge is going to get there. He's going to ask you about them. And if he doesn't, that's why, you've appointed me as your representative. Well, you told the judge about your back, and, I see some problems with depression. You have problems with concentration? Oh, yeah. Well, how long can you concentrate? 15, 20 minutes, and then, my mind is shot. Oh, and what about these headaches? How frequently are you having those? I have 2 or 3 of them a week. Well, how long do they last? 3 or 4 hours. I will get on the record what needs to get on the record to win your case. And we've talked about this many times. I have a vested interest in winning your case. I'm not going to let something just go by and not get handled in a hearing, and just hope that the judge makes the right decision. I'm going to do everything I can, including questioning you on things that the judge didn't, so that the judge knows that you do have some problems with those. So, preparing for your hearing. Know what it's for. It is kind of the same thing as the initial and reconsideration levels, but it's your best chance to win, and it's all about how you present yourself. Are you going to answer the questions that are put to you without going into left field? Yes, you are. If there's a yes or no question put to you, are you going to answer it yes or no, or are you going to start monologuing? And the judges hate that. I hate that when I ask you a yes or no question. Answer it yes or no, because usually what's happening is after the yes or no answer, then we're going to ask you to give us an example. Now you have the opportunity to monologue and expound on what's going on with you. That's big in a hearing. That's what we want. Yeah. We want to talk about, the joke that I always make to my clients in prep. We want to talk about the big three things: symptoms, symptoms, symptoms. That's what we want to talk about in a hearing. So yeah, I'm going to get some yes or no answers from you, but I'm going to get you to describe your symptoms.
Yeah.
I'm going to get you to describe how your day-to-day life is impacted. So before the hearing, just trust that that's what we're there for. There is a purpose for it. It's a really, really encouraging purpose, because that is where most cases are won.
Yeah, and then just to frame it this way, it's what you're already talking about, but to frame it this way, a lot of claimants they're feeling pretty defeated, pretty discouraged when they get to the hearing level, just because they've already gotten two denials and it's been so long. Just keep in mind, like, this is what we've been gearing up toward. Hopefully we win it initial. If we don't win it initial, hopefully we can win it at the appeal. But realistically, when we file a case, we are, from the ground up, we're preparing for the hearing. And so you might be 14 months or 18 months or 22 months into this, and that's absurd. But just keep in mind, like, we're here. This is really important. We've made it to this point. So I just wanted to frame it that way.
Yeah, and it is absurd. And I know that this doesn't make it any better, but, it's absurd for you and at any given time, I don't know, 250,000 people in the United States who are in the same boat.
Yeah.
Just because you're waiting just in our area, and we live in a kind of a mid-sized metropolitan area. Even in our area, we have two hearing offices that are within 20 miles of each other, and each of them have like 5,000 pending cases. So just in our area, not my state, but just our area, and we're not a huge area, 10,000 cases are pending. And statewide, I don't know at the hearing level. I do know at the lower levels, at any given time statewide, there's about 130,000 cases pending at any given time. So it's precious little comfort to you to tell you that other people are having to wait a stupid long time. But the fact of the matter is that other people are having to wait a stupid long time.
Yeah.
And that's part of the Social Security disability process.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that just because it's taking a long time, that doesn't mean that something is going horribly wrong.
Oh, right.
I think we have a lot of clients, after 3 months of their case pending, they're like, what's going on? What's wrong with the case?
Right.
And it is ridiculous, but there's nothing wrong with the case. It's just they're understaffed. There's more disabled people than there are Social Security workers to be able to process that.
Oh, sure.
So 3 months in, that doesn't surprise us. It ticks us off, but it doesn't surprise us. We see that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, think about the stats that I just gave you about our hearing office. So both of those hearing offices, I believe the full staffing is 10 judges. And I know for a fact that they hear anywhere from 6 to 7 cases a day. Not every day, but 6 or 7 cases a day. Best case scenario, think about that. You got 5,000 cases pending, and in a week, you're able to get about 400.
Yeah.
You're able to clear out about 400 with a fully staffed hearing office. And there's going to be that many cases coming from the lower levels, because the lower levels, they did deny the vast majority. Mm-hmm. And if you are persistent, which again, that's the secret to disability, if you're persistent, you're appealing, and it's going to the hearing level, and it's going to be stuck in that queue with the other 5,000 people.
Right.
Maybe more if you're in a really large metropolitan area. But yeah, trusting the process and knowing what you're there for. You were there to tell the judge your symptoms, and your symptoms as they apply to your day-to-day life. How do my systems impact my ability to cook, to clean, to drive, to shop, to interact with people? Mm-hmm. Do I want people coming over to my house? Well, no, I feel so bad about things. I don't want to interact with anybody. I don't want them to see me, don't want them to talk to me, and I don't want to talk to them. Stuff like that. It's okay, this is your opportunity to get to talk to the judge about that. What this is not an opportunity for, and I definitely want to put this out there, and we see it from time to time, thank goodness not a whole lot, but we do see it from time to time, that because the claimant can choose their manner of appearance, and we've talked about, since February of 2020, I think I've had 5 face-to-face hearings. Before COVID, almost every case I went in, I put on a suit, and I went in and presented the case face-to-face. That's kind of how they were. And then in COVID, that changed, and they started doing phone hearings. And the administration realized that their accuracy rate was not impacted at all. The judges liked it for the most part. There are some judges that like putting on the robe and being seen. Okay. But most of the judges like being able to just hang out at their house and have the hearing. Representatives, for the most part, like to hang out at their house and do hearings by phone. So that has basically become the default manner of appearance, by phone. But you can do it by video. They use Microsoft Teams, which rarely works. And then you have the absolute right, you as the claimant have the absolute right to have a face-to-face hearing if you want. And what we have found is some claimants, if they are so angry that they were denied at the initial and then again at the reconsideration level, they request a face-to-face hearing. And of course, I work for you, you don't work for me. I can advise you, hey, listen, I live 400 miles from you, and it's going to be a hardship for me to get there. Why do you want to have a face-to-face hearing? And then it's almost always the same thing. I want to look somebody in the eye. These people who've denied me. And I'm like, let's
Slow down.
Let's slow down and let's calm down, because is that why you want to go in? You want to give the judge a piece of your mind, let them know you realize that the judge had nothing to do with the lower level denials. Some of the first words out of the judge's mouths are going to be, I am not bound by those decisions. I am not even influenced by those decisions. Because he or she didn't have anything to do with those decisions. And then he's going to say, or she's going to say, and I'm here to make a new independent decision based on the medical records, your testimony, and Social Security law.
Yep.
It's its own animal. It is not influenced by the fact that the lower levels denied you twice. And you come to a hearing wanting to get a pound of flesh from the judge for those denials. 1, you won't be able to. It won't happen. And 2, if you open your mouth and just start giving them grief about how stupid Social Security is and how evil they are for denying you, you've lost your case. That's just going to happen. You're going to lose, because we're not there to basically, berate Social Security. Social Security judges, they're not there to be punching bags for you because you're angry that you got denied at the lower levels. And so if I get even the inkling that the reason you want a face-to-face hearing is so you can let the judge have it, I'll probably quietly but professionally bow out. After telling you do this, and it's a fool's errand. You do this, what you think is going to happen, that you're going to get through to them now. They're going to see how mad you are. They're going to see the damage that those lower level decisions did to you and your family, that somehow that the judge is going to take responsibility for that. He had nothing to do with it. It's not going to happen. So after I try to convince you, man, if that's the reason you want a face-to-face hearing, I don't want any part of it. Let's do a phone hearing. And if you're like, nope, I want a face-to-face hearing, I will probably just withdraw from your case. Yeah. Because there is really no place in a hearing for that kind of, I'm going to let them have it and stuff like that. I've had some claimants in the hearing threaten the judge, and
it doesn't go over well.
Ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a 0% success rate when you basically, want to threaten the judge. I had one judge here, face-to-face, long before COVID hit, and my client had he had a diagnosis of a personality disorder, but there was really nothing in the file that showed that he was violent or anything like that. And the judge was questioning him about, what are some of the symptoms you have from this personality disorder? And he's like, well, like right now, I'm so angry. And the judge is like, well, okay, all right. Well, what's going on? Well, I'm so angry. I'm feeling like coming across this table and just punching you right in the face. And I'm sitting next to my client, and I looked at him
Like,
like
what?
this, and then I looked at the judge. The judge never even looked up, and he said, I highly recommend that you don't do that because I won't just sit here. I'm like, we lost the case.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I'm like, why did you tell the judge you wanted to go punch him in the face? Well, that's just the way I felt. And you felt the need to share that with him. Okay, well, I don't think it's going to go well for us. And like 2 weeks later, we got the denial. Are you going to appeal my case? No. No, you testified that you wanted to punch somebody in the face for no reason. No, I'm not going to appeal your case. But anyway, it goes nowhere. If you think that having a face-to-face hearing, you're just going to get your case or your point across or your case across or your symptoms across better, I would say 99% of the time that's not true. I think we've talked about this since COVID. I have had one case, just one, where I felt that if we'd have been face-to-face, it probably would have gone better. My lady had, my client, she had horrible varicosities in her legs.
Yeah.
And the hearing was held in summertime, but they weren't doing face-to-face hearings. COVID had just hit. I think this is probably 2021. And if we would have gone in and it was summertime, I would have asked her to wear shorts, just so when you walk in, the judge sees her legs are gray. Like from the thigh down, her legs are gray. They kind of look like somebody's done makeup on The Walking Dead on her legs. It's horrible. But we had a phone hearing. And so I ended up arguing for that, and we lost the case. And I appealed it by, asking her, take some photos. Just, take a photo with your phone, email it to me. I'll upload it to the file. And that case is still wending its way through federal court right now. But I think maybe, don't know, but maybe that would have helped if we had a face-to-face hearing. But for the vast majority of cases, like I said, 99%, having the hearing by phone is just as good as having one face-to-face. And again, if you want one face-to-face, it's your right. And if I think you're giving me a good reason for it, I will fly or drive to wherever that hearing is, and I will present it, because I have presented, several face-to-face hearings, not many, but I think 5, and they're all that I had to travel to, to do. But I will say, of those 5, none of them were necessary.
Yeah.
We could have done it by phone, and it was hardship for everybody. But back to my point. The purpose for a hearing is not for you to grieve or to air your grievances with Social Security. Keeping in mind that if I appealed your case to the hearing level, that was an airing of our grievances. The denial was unjust. We don't agree with it. We want a hearing before an administrative law judge. We don't want a hearing before an administrative law judge to re-argue with the lower level that denied you, because they're done. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to argue the facts of the case, and my client is going to testify to the symptoms that they have. And you, a new and independent decision maker, is going to get to hear these facts for the first time, and you're going to be able to make a decision based on better evidence than just the paper file that the lower levels denied my clients on. That's the purpose. And again, going back to our question at hand, how do you prepare for a hearing? Know what its purpose is. The purpose is not, I'm going to stick it to them. I'm going to let them, no. That's over, And the lower levels, they did what they do. And it's nationwide. There are some lower levels that allow more than others. But for the most part, at the initial and the reconsideration level, it's a paper review. You fill out some forms. They get your medical records. And they make a decision, which is usually pretty garbage.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. I don't like it, but that's the way it is. And the hearing is a whole new monster. It's not like that. It is not just a paper review. It's a place where you get to interact with the decision maker in real time, whether it's by phone or video or face-to-face. You get to interact with them in real time. You get to have a conversation with them. They get to follow up questions. They get ask questions to clarify things, which is wonderful. You don't get that on a form. You wrote something on a form. Well, did she mean this or did she mean that? I don't know. Well, in a hearing, wait a minute, did you mean this? Well, I meant, and then you explain. It's like, okay, we're having a conversation.
Yep.
You're getting the information across so much better. And
Yeah.
again, just look at the statistics. They don't lie. And your chance of winning never gets better than it is at the hearing. Therefore, take advantage of it. Don't go at it in a very adversarial, mad way. Go at it. I'm going to explain myself. I'm going to tell you what my symptoms are. I'm going to tell you what my life has been like for the last 2 or 3 years or however long you've been disabled. And then when I cross-examine you, I'm going to make sure that you get those points across to the judge.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Okay. So to wrap up, why don't you go over logistically what the hearing is actually going to look like? So client gets the phone call. Now we're actually in the hearing. Just for a couple minutes, just go over
Sure.
what the client can expect, so it's not such a daunting process.
Great question. Yeah, I call it the mechanics. And we'll back up a little bit. Like a week before the hearing, not necessarily 7 days, but usually the week before the hearing. If you have a hearing on a Tuesday, I might call you on a Friday. So it's going to be the week before, but maybe not the Tuesday before your Tuesday hearing. But I'm going to call you and I'm going to tell you this stuff. And it's basically, I call it the preparation. I'm going to tell you the mechanics of the hearing, because that's the big thing that you need to know. What's it like? What's it look like? So, yes, the day of the hearing, the morning of the hearing, or the afternoon of the hearing, whenever your hearing time is, around that time, you're going to get a phone call. It's going to either say it's from Social Security, SSA, it's going to say it's from the U.S. government, or it's going to be an area code that you don't recognize. You answer the phone.
Yep.
If your hearing's at 11 o'clock and at 10:53 the phone rings, please answer the call, because it's probably Social Security. And if it's not, if it's Cousin Betty, and Cousin Betty, I can't talk to you right now. Social Security's gonna be calling me. I'll call you back soon. Hang up the phone, clear the line, so when Social Security calls you, you answer. So when you answer, the clerk who's handling the case, it's the judge's clerk, will say, hello, I'm so-and-so with Social Security. We're here to start your 11 o'clock hearing. Mr. Groves is already on the line. And the reason that I'm almost always already on the line is they call me first, because they double check your phone number. And they're like,
Okay.
we have Miss So-and-so's phone number is this. And I'm like, yeah, that's, I talked to her last week and that is her correct number. And it's the number that we give them, actually. So Mr. Groves is already on the line. Are you ready for your hearing? And then, you as the claimant will say, yeah, I'm ready for my hearing. All right, well, let me connect you to the judge. And the judge is usually the last one to get connected. It's just a conference call. And so when that happens, the judge will come on and say, well, hello, my name is Judge so-and-so, and I'm here to make a new and independent decision based on your medical records, your testimony today, and the Social Security law. I'm not bound by the lower lower level decisions. I'm not even influenced by them. So it always happens. And the judge's main questions after he swears you in, it's the only formal thing, by the way, in a hearing, is that you do get sworn in. He will ask you, even though we're on the phone, please raise your right hand. You do promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. Or do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the whole truth? Under the penalty of perjury, that'll be the oath that they're asking you to take. And you'll say you do. There's another person in the hearing, which we'll talk about in a minute, who also is going to get sworn in. And then the judge will almost always come out of the gate asking you about identifying information. How old are you? How far did you go in school? Are you married? Who all lives in your household? Oh, you have 3 kids. What are the ages of your kids? And then the judge might ask you some questions about, what does your spouse do? Do you help your children with their schoolwork, stuff like that? But the main meat and potatoes of his next questions are going to be about your work. When's the last time you worked? What were you doing? Describe it. And of course, what you want to do is you want to describe the job as you did it. I was a mechanic. Well, how much did you lift and carry? And well, there are sometimes I'm lifting or helping to lift, 100-pound, pieces of engine.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You have to be on your feet all day long? Yeah, I didn't do any sitting at this. Sometimes I'm on my back underneath the car, but yeah, it's basically I'm on my feet all day. That's what you want to do. If it was a desk job, sit down most of the day. Yeah. Do you have to make, lots of decisions? Yeah. Do you have to use your arms and hands? Yeah, it's a sit-down job. That's what you do. You're using your arms and hands all day long. And wants to know if you had to concentrate on that. Most desk jobs, are ones that you do have to do a lot of thinking, a lot of decision-making, stuff like that. So he's asking you about those things, and you want to describe them as you did them, not as you would try to do them now that you're disabled, as you did them when you were working before you became disabled. After that, it's the only part that I can't tell you exactly what happens, because there's usually a turn to me or the judge just continues. And the turn to me or the judge continuing will be for your medical conditions. Mm-hmm. And they will say something, okay, well, let's talk about, why you feel you're disabled. And they'll go through everything they're supposed to. In fact, the law says that they have to consider everything that the medical records show. So if the judge does it, that's what they're going to do. Well, let's start with the back disorder. You have any difficulties being on your feet? Oh, okay. Well, how long could you stand or walk before you'd have to sit down? You having difficulty sitting? Oh, okay. You have to get up and work out the kinks? Okay. Well, how long can you sit before you have to do that? Oh, okay. And if it's a mental health, do you have any difficulties concentrating, staying on task? Oh, well, how long could you concentrate before your mind would wander? So they're going to ask you these kinds of questions, unless they turn it over to me to ask it. And this is the one, about half the cases they do. They turn it over to me to ask the medical questions. And guess what? I'm going to ask just the same thing. Yeah. You have difficulties being on your feet. You have difficulties concentrating. You have difficulties staying on task. You have difficulties using your arms and hands. So, and we're going to talk about these things. None of this will be a surprise to you, because a week before the hearing, I will have talked to you and said, this is what the judge is probably going to ask you. This is what I'm definitely going to ask you. Mm-hmm. And so that is the meat and potatoes of your hearing, talking about your medical conditions. And remember, what are we there to talk about? Symptoms, symptoms, symptoms. I don't care that you have degenerative disc disease. Well, I care, but I don't care that much. I do care that because of that, you can't walk for very long. You can't be on your feet for very long. You can't sit with your feet flat on the floor like you would be sitting at a desk typing. I care about that. I care that there's pain shooting into your leg, and that your pain level is at like a 7 or 8 out of a 10-point scale. I care about that. That's all symptoms, and those are the questions I'm going to ask you. Sitting, standing, walking, lifting, carrying, pain, stuff like that. So we're there to talk about those three things: symptoms, symptoms, symptoms. Same thing with mental health: concentrating, staying on task, following through on things, getting along with other people, adapting to changes. Your boss comes to you, 1 o'clock in the afternoon and says, I need you to do this. And your mental health condition is like, you switch gears on me in the middle of the day and I'm going to shut down. Okay, well, we need to know that. That's a symptom that you would want to talk about in your hearing, and we will talk about that.
Right.
So that's the bulk of the hearing, and then at the end there's that other person that I talked about who also gets sworn in. They're a vocational witness. Social Security calls them a vocational expert. I normally won't, but sometimes just for shop talk we'll call them a VE, which stands for vocational expert. But I rarely will call them an expert in the hearing, especially because the judge usually wants me to call them an expert before they've even opened their mouths. And I'm like, if they say all sorts of garbage, I don't want to have pinned myself in a corner or painted myself in a corner and like, wow, they're testifying all sorts of garbage. I know none of that's true, but yet I've told the judge, yeah, I agree, they're an expert. Anyway, but the vocational witness, I tell my clients that they're not a good guy, but they're not a bad guy. They are not against me. In a Social Security disability hearing, there is nobody against me. I am an advocate for you, and therefore, because you've watched Perry Mason and Law and Order, there's got to be somebody, against me. If I'm for you, somebody's got to be against you. No, not in a disability hearing. So the vocational witness is not there to tank your case, but he's not there to help you either. Yeah. He's there to talk about jobs, and the judge, because it is sworn testimony, will have already likely sworn him in, and we'll ask some questions. Can you classify the claimant's past work? And they'll give some codes and some strength levels, and then they'll ask a series of hypotheticals, and they're all about you, the claimant. But for some reason, Social Security doesn't believe that they can ask questions about you like that. So they'll say somebody the claimant's age, 45 years old, and somebody with the claimant's education, they have a 12th grade education, and somebody with the claimant's work history, they were a mechanic for 30 years. If this person was limited to, and then they'll give lots of limitations, and they'll ask the vocational witness, could that person perform the mechanic job? Oh, no. Okay, well, could they perform any job in the national economy? And that there's going to be a yes or no answer. Yeah, if there's a yes answer, well, give me those jobs. Give me a smattering. Give me an example. Give me 3 of them. Give me 3 jobs that have that profile that I just gave you. And that's damaging. That's a bad thing. If we get those, now the judge has an avenue to deny your case, but then the judge is probably going to ask a second hypothetical question to the vocational witness. It's going to be, same question, but now they're limited in blah, 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 blah. Could that person do the mechanic job? Okay. What about, could they do any job in the national economy? No. Oh, okay. Well, if the judge goes with that decision, that's favorable to you, because if you can't do any work, you are by definition disabled.
Yep.
And that part of the hearing is about 10 to 15 minutes long. It's very boring for my clients because you don't participate. You're listening. If you're on the phone, you're listening, and you're hearing all sorts of stuff, but really you're not doing anything. And after the judge has asked a series of questions, I'm going to cross-examine them. I might ask my own series of questions, or I might ask them to defend the testimony they gave, especially if the testimony they gave is garbage. And sometimes it happens. Most of the time, it's not garbage, but it's certainly something that I can attack with a follow-up cross-examination question. And like I said, it's boring for the claimant because they're not speaking, they're not testifying. They're just kind of listening in. And then after all that happens, the judge will give a kind of a canned phrase like, "Well, thank you for the hearing. Thank you for appearing. I'm going to consider everything, and I will issue a decision within the next 60 to 90 days." And that concludes our hearing, and everybody can hang up. And then that's the hearing. They last 40 to 45 minutes on average. A quick hearing is 30 minutes. A long hearing is an hour. It'll fly by, though. Most of my clients say, "Well, that didn't take very long. It was 45 minutes. It didn't seem like 45 minutes." No, because we're having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of flies by. But that's the mechanics of it. What I like about the phone hearings is they're normally pretty close to being on time. And what I mean by that is sometimes they're 5 or 10 minutes early, and sometimes they're 5 or 10 minutes late. In the olden days when we were doing face-to-face hearings, I could be in a hearing office all day long. Some of the hearings will run 3 hours late. And I'd just be sitting there with my client, and they're like, "Well, our hearing was 3 hours ago." "I know, but we have to sit here and wait." That has not happened with the phone hearings. Some of them have been like 30 or 45 minutes late, but usually the clerk will call my office, and they'll talk to one of my employees, "Tell Mr. Groves that we're running late and we're probably going to be another 15 or 20 minutes. And then I can call my client. They say, "Hey, listen, I know you've been expecting a call, so was I. They just called and they're running really late, and therefore they'll be calling you in probably the 15 or 20 minutes. And that has happened a handful of times. But, the other hundreds of hearings that I've had since COVID have all pretty much run on time. And mechanically, I prefer them. It seems like the conversations are a little bit clearer because nobody's talking over anybody, because you can't on the phone. If 2 people are talking on the phone, it's cacophony. Whereas 2 people talking, over each other in a hearing, you can kind of follow it face to face. But the judge usually warns about that. Please make sure that I'm done asking my question before you answer it. And I will tell you that also in the prep. Don't talk over anybody. Make sure that they're done talking. Don't interrupt. Please, please, please don't interrupt. If the judge is asking a question or the judge is saying something, certainly if the judge is asking the vocational witness questions at the end, don't jump in. Well, that's, I can't do that job. No, that's not your time to speak. It's a vocational witness's time to speak. So please don't jump all over them. It will not go well for you.
Yeah.
You'll probably get your hand slapped. A verbal hand slap from the judge. And you don't want that because it's uncomfortable for everybody.
Right. Okay, good. Well, last thing I'll say, I'll just mention the hearing prep video that we have. It goes over a lot of the same stuff, but it's a little bit more in detail. It's about 30 minutes long, and I'll attach that to this episode. I'll just put it in the description.
Excellent.
All right, cool.
All right, thanks.
If you have a question about your disability case, drop it in the comment section below, and we will do our best to answer it in the next episode.